You're listening to the All Day Ruckoff podcast, episode number 98. Welcome to the All Day Ruckoff podcast, episode number 98. This is your host, Brian, and I wanted to thank you so much for tuning in. The All Day Ruckoff podcast focuses on the GRT and wrecking community and includes interviews, motivation, and advice to keep you informed and get you ready for your next event. In this episode, Christopher, the water bottle opening champ, joins us to talk about more topics than I can probably even come up with for this intro. We talk about how he found GORUCK, how difficult opening water bottles can be, some of the events he's done, and how to remain injury-free doing these kind of events. After talking with Christopher, I found out that he's been involved with fitness-related activities since he was 13, and he's never had a truly major injury in all those years. So one of the things I tried to dig into was what people can do to avoid injuries when they're training for events and specifically for GORUCK events. I wasn't going to name this episode Opening Water Bottles with Christopher, but when I reached out to him and I asked him to send over a picture that he wanted to use for the cover of the podcast, he sent over the picture of him trying to open the water bottle on TV. So I figured if he was game, then I might as well go all in on it. If you don't know what I'm talking about with water bottles, check out the show notes. I've got a link to the video, and there's a chance that you've already seen the video and you just don't know it's him, because it has over a couple million views. I know it was shared a ton when it happened. Basically, he had a lot of problems opening a water bottle at a baseball game. If you haven't been to the All Day Ruckoff store lately, we've got some new products in. Pretty excited about them. Some 1000D Cordura notebook covers, which are selling out really quick. So we're going to have a restock of those. Also have some new 1" by 1" morale patches and some blank morale patches in 4 different colors. So you can go on over to alldayruckoff.com/store. Check those out. The blank morale patches are great for writing whatever you want on them, slapping them on your pack, and you're good to go. Thank you so much for all the support, and here's the interview with Christopher. So I was thinking that we could start off with how you got into GORUCK.
Yeah, so I was thinking back myself. I mean, this goes back years, and it came down to I did a Spartan race with a friend who got coaxed into one over a bet at a bar over drinks, bad choices made over alcohol. And I showed up. It was Citi Field, New York City in 2013. And I saw all these people with backpacks, and I was like, what the hell are all these people doing with backpacks? And, so it was like, oh, GORUCK or something. And I was like, what the hell is this? At that time, I had never done anything of this nature, no obstacle course races, nothing. And I went on the internet and looked it up, and I was like, oh, my God, this looks like pretty intense. So I did another Spartan race up in Tuxedo, New York, and I got coaxed into my first light by a guy, Steve-O, who a lot of people know. And he said, yeah, just show up, no big deal, don't worry about it, I was like, all right, I went on the website and I was like, wait, I got to buy a backpack that's like $300. I was like, what the heck is this? Needless to say, got the backpack, bought the bricks, wrapped it up. My now wife, who was my, she was my fiance back then. She thought I was crazy. My parents are like, what the hell are you doing? This is really dumb. You're, going to be 40 years old, close to it. What the heck? So signed up for my first light. That was in June of 2013 in New York City. That's how I found out about it.
That's wild. So, basically getting talked into a Spartan race is how you got so involved in the GORUCK community.
Yeah. So the crazy thing was that I had all these images in my head of I thought everyone was going to be super duper athlete. Everyone was going to be better than me, faster than me, bigger than me, stronger than me. And I was just going to be overwhelmed by the whole thing. And I remember showing up to the first light, which was, we had a Soul Crusher. I don't know if he's running events any longer. And I showed up and I was like, wait a minute, these people are all like me. It was just a diverse group of people. And they were all there, and I'm like, all right, I think I can hang with these people. And I was like, all right, this is going to be pretty good. So, I mean, leading up to it, I was scared to death, but we did that first light. It was great. It was 8 hours back then, not 4 hours, 5 hours as it is now. And then, that started a 6-year run of events that I've been going on now.
Yeah, it was different back then on a number of levels, right? Because now you go
Yeah.
to the GORUCK website and you look at the pictures, and not everything is 100% intimidation. But back then in 2013, every single picture, everyone's just jacked. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna be showing up. I'm gonna be 100% the weakest person here for sure.
I think one of the other differences was there wasn't that much information out there of what to expect. So I would ask people, and no one I knew did any of these events, and even people who did do the events wouldn't tell me anything. So I had no idea what the heck to expect. You know,
Yeah,
all I knew was we were getting met up with a guy who was a Marine recon and getting a slice of special operations training. And hey, what else is going to be? I don't know. You know.
yeah. There was so much less information and so much less contact information. You mentioned that as your fiance at the time, everyone kind of thought you were crazy. When I did my first event, I don't think she was my fiance yet, but uh, it was like 10. I kind of undersold it to my parents and my girlfriend at the time. I was like, it's gonna be 6 hours. Like, don't worry about it. Like I'll call you when it's over. Like, this is not gonna be a bad thing. And I think like 10 hours in, my now wife is calling emergency rooms, like seeing if they just dropped my body off somewhere. She's like, I haven't heard from him. My parents were in Wisconsin, like go into the website. They're like, there's no phone number, there's no email address, there's no contact. It was so fly by night back in 20.
I remember coming home and they said, "Well, how was it? How did you do in your race?" Or and I didn't even know what to explain. Like, I was just so without words because it was so different than anything I'd ever done up to that point. And I was like, it's sort of like, wow, but they were like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we carried a heavy log from Harlem down to Central Park. And we dumped it off, and my feet have blisters, but it was really great. And they just looked at me like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're always in a different state right after the event. I mean, you've done a ton of events, so you know that. So trying to explain what you just accomplished right after an event is like pretty much impossible.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of things before. I've done bodybuilding, I've done track and field, I've done martial arts, and this was just so different than anything else I've ever done. And it was just like, wow, I'm testing myself in a way that I've never been tested before, and that part for me was the biggest, I guess, allure of all these events. Was like, wow, I've never done anything like this before, so it made me want to come back and test myself even more, which made me want to sign up for the harder event. Next was the challenge, and then the heavy, and then another heavy, and then eventually an HTL. So that's what kept me coming back. And I guess my friends, they were like, what the heck? They couldn't understand that, but I guess you guys do, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's two different people, right?
Yeah. And, like I did the first light, and it was amazing. And then I had the whole water bottle thing, everyone knows about that. And I got ribbed over that endlessly at that second light. But at that time, you had to have done a challenge to have been on the tough page. So I wasn't on the tough page at that time when that happened because I hadn't done a challenge yet. So
Yeah. So I searched the tough page for water bottle just to pull up the video so I could watch it again before we talked. And people are still on you for that. I mean, there's posts from 2018, 2019, like, Christopher, how's that water bottle treating you? Bring one to an event?
You know what? Just jumping forward. So the first heavy I ever did was 024. It was in December with Cadre Joel. And at like halfway through, he breaks out a water bottle and gave it to me. And he said, if you drop this, if you lose this, there's going to be hell to pay. And everyone laughed. It was funny, but, it was one of those like, funny moments in the middle of a miserable event. But like, yeah, during events, I get ribbed about it. At home, I get ribbed about it. At work, it's just one of those things that never ends. But it's funny. Everyone gets a laugh out of it.
Do you get a laugh out of it now, or does it rub you a little raw?
Yeah, because it's a meme, and these things just get circulated all the time amongst like bodybuilding websites and fitness websites and sports blooper websites. It just always gets circulated in the whole universe of those type of things. So then every time someone sees it, they poke me about it. But it's fun. It's funny. So.
That's a good attitude to have. I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good laugh, and it was the funny part about it was unassuming. I had no idea what was happening at the time, and it could have been way worse because, like I tell everyone, like 2 years prior to that, I was 50 pounds heavier, and then it would have been, fat Mets fan can't open water bottle versus bodybuilder can't open water bottle. So I was happy about that.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you definitely got a good title off of it.
Yeah. So after that second light, I signed up for the first challenge I did. And that was when it was a 1 a.m. start time. I'm sure you remember that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, that was a different animal because back then, they didn't have the HTL. So you didn't know if it was only going 12 hours. That one went about 14 hours, so you never knew back then.
Yeah. I mean, there was no end in sight because there was, the current events, you got that light class buffer. And I guess a cadre could run you into the light class and be like, man, you guys screwed up so bad. Like you're holding front leaning rest while they do, intros for the light. But you pretty much have that cut now.
Funny thing was in the HTL I did, which was New York City 9/11 in 2015. They always say showing up to the challenge is the hardest part, and I agree with that. And we showed up, and we screwed up so badly at the roll call. Our roll call was about an hour and a half just in the front leaning rest and rucks overhead, just because we were so bad and we couldn't even figure our names out during the roll call because there was a lot of people there. And it's just like, wow, this is just never going to end. It's just more to your point.
Yeah, I think it was a Mog Mile Tough in Seattle. Rooney was out for it, and I showed up just to take some pictures. I had an appointment early the next day, and with GORUCK events, you never plan anything the next day because who knows, you might still be doing the event. So I showed up. I had about 3 hours to take pictures, or maybe 2 hours, and the entire time they were at roll call because the team couldn't get 10 push-ups together right, and it was just so many push-ups, so much front leaning rest. He was having them run around this water fountain to loosen it up. It was crazy.
And I'll tell you, I really thought when I was going through that part, just the roll call, I said, you know what, this HTL is not going to happen. I was like, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I was like, because my head was just beating with sweat, and everyone was just, I was like, you know what, this just might not be my event. We got through it, but that was probably one of the hardest parts of the whole thing. Was just sitting there in a front leaning rest for almost 2 hours, or an hour and a half, or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no end in sight. And then you're just banging that same muscle group.
Yeah. And it was just like, oh man, but hey, you know what? When I tell people with the HTL, you got to make up your mind just in the beginning that you're going to see it to the end, no matter what. You're going to show up to the challenge. You're going to deal with your blisters. You're going to deal with your chafing, and that's the sole focus. And so it was just, okay, fine. This stinks, but I got to see it to the end.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have. So, I mean, you've done a ton of GORUCK events, and you've got a huge history of stuff you've done. I mean, I've got the email you sent up. So you've got a 2nd degree black belt. You were an All-American hammer thrower in high school. You're now an ex-bodybuilder, so you were a bodybuilder at some point. So when you I mean, so you've got quite the career of accomplishments.
Yeah, so I've always done athletic events, and the one thing that always makes me come back to the GORUCK events was that a lot of the things that you're tested on during these events, you can't really train for. So it's easy to train to run for a half marathon. It's easy to train to do maybe certain lifting events. You can train to cycle a certain amount of miles. But how do you really train to deal with cold water or sleep deprivation or showing up at an event after a long day of work, when you have kids at home screaming, which I know you do? That's where I love these events, where it's like you can't really train in the gym for that kind of stuff, and it requires to pull on you, for certain things that just test your mettle, it tests your grit. which is one of the things that I always keep coming back to, which is why, I'm still doing these events 6 years later. So, I never found those other things and those other endeavors I've done, but that's why I like these events so much.
It's so true, right? I mean, how do you train for 2 hours of front leaning rest? And knowing your luck, if you did train for 2 hours of front leaning rest, you'd have 2 hours of the bottom end of a squat.
Yeah, that's Jason McCarthy's famous words. Find the bottom of the squat, the overhead squat. Jeez,
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's just a whole different animal, which is, one of the reasons why I think, I mean, like you said, you keep doing events, I keep doing events. Every time you show up, it's something different.
Yeah, I remember I did Brag Heavy 2.0, and back then I did the Heavy 024 with Joel, which was only about 2 months prior to that, and let alone at that point I had never been up for 24 hours straight, let alone done any type of thing 24 hours straight, and then you add on all these other things, the 12-mile ruck, all these other the environmental factors of cold weather and rain and blisters and all these other things. You say to yourself, "Wow, I'm just so out of your comfort zone dealing with all these elements." So I remember at Brag Heavy at 2.0, at the end, you had Dan on, and he didn't really talk about this that much. I wish he would have. Right at the end of that thing, we were about 27, 28 hours into it, maybe. I don't even remember. We're just standing in this parking lot. Everyone's shivering, freezing cold. And he looks at all of us, and he's like, all right, you guys started with a 12-miler, you're going to finish with a 12-miler. I'm like, this can't be happening. Like, this can't be happening. So he started pointing to people, turn around and go, turn around and go, turn around and go. At that moment, 4 people quit right in the parking lot. Go down the parking lot, and we're like, all right, this is going to happen. And then the event ended in the darkness right at the end of the parking lot. But those 4 people quit right up in the parking lot 2 minutes before the event was over. So I was like, how do you train yourself for that?
That's such a crazy story. And it's so true, right? I mean, what other event are you going to find outside of, some of the crazier stuff, like maybe the death race, which is just ridiculous in its own right. But like the traditional events that you find, like what event are you going to find where you're going to go out, think you're going to do a 12-miler, and then the event's just going to end? It's just going to be like a giant mind game.
Yeah, and after the event, like some of the people from that event went on Facebook and they were kind of upset. They felt they got cheated. But I remember one of the cadres mentioned, it's like, hey, no one else quit, but you were okay. It was in your mind. It wasn't in your body. They were like, if you had to walk for your life 12 more miles, you would have done it. So what was the problem? And I don't remember who said it, but one of them said, you know what? Those people who quit probably got more out of that whole event than anyone else. And I agree with that.
Yeah, that's a lesson learned if I've ever heard one. I learned a lesson even just listening to the story from him, because you can just imagine yourself in that boat and how you would feel. And I know when I was talking to Dan, he said that at least one of the persons who quit has come back, has done a Brag Heavy since and finished, has done a ton of events, and said that was one of the best learning experiences they've ever had in their life.
Yeah, definitely. So that's why I keep coming back. I mean, now I have a little more responsibilities. I have a child at home. I'm self-employed. I have a very heavy work schedule. So I try to fit in as many T&Ls as I can. But I still come back for as much as I can, not as much as I would like to do, but as much as I can feasibly do. For that very reason, because what, every event you do find one little thing that might test you in a way you never tested before. And that's sort of what makes me come back.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, at least personally, I mean, I've got an office job, and I mean, you have a somewhat office job as well too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, but I pick things up from events that I can apply to like my everyday life, to my, career, and to the work I do that I wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Yeah, I guess one of the big things too, Brian, is that I guess it's weird when you see your colleagues or your friends get so stressed over what seems like, things that are nothing to us, and then they get all flustered, or, they get overwhelmed by things, and you call back on some of these things. You're like, wow, that's no big deal. Like, I remember when I was cold and shivering and miserable and went for 2 days straight or whatever. Like, there's nothing, so.
Yeah, it's all relative, right? I mean,
right,
we just have after you've done some GORUCK events, you just have a different look on relative. Like if you've got a meeting like you and I are talking over your lunch. And so it doesn't sound like you're eating lunch right now. So you might be eating afterwards. And some people might be
Yeah.
freaking out if,
The crazy thing eating wise, like over the years, like I've done every diet. I mean, I don't want to stray too far into this. Like I've done every stupid diet out there. I've done keto, I've done paleo. You name the crazy diet, I've done it. Now I just really eat when I'm hungry. I try not to overeat, and I try to keep things in relative proportion and balance. And you know what? It works for me. You know, so I'd much rather be talking to you rather than worrying about my lunch.
I love it. Eating when you're hungry's worked out pretty well for me too. But I'm sure you know people who, if they're not eating at 11:30 or getting their lunch in, like they're freaking out. I
Yeah.
know people who, if you schedule, a meeting or something over their lunch, they'll like decline. Like, there's no way this is happening. And you've done heavies, I'm sure, where they've taken away foods. I've done toughs where they've
Oh
taken
yeah.
away food. It's like, you're not eating for 8 hours. All right.
Brian, if you want to talk about neurotic food eating, when I was doing my bodybuilding stuff, I used to show up with an igloo of pre-made food to my grandmother's house just because I wanted to control what I was eating and make sure. And everyone would get upset with me. They would say, your grandmother made this Easter dinner, and here you're showing up with broccoli and bland chicken, and she's upset and everything. But that's how neurotic. I get it. I used to be that way, but now it's I look back and I laugh. It was silly, but I've been there. I've definitely been there.
I've done, maybe not to that extent, but I've done the same thing where I've gone out. I've got a lot of family in Wisconsin, and we'll show up. This is probably for a couple summers it happened, and the first thing I do is go straight to the grocery store and buy my own food.
Right.
Just so you can control all that. But
yeah, so I mean, some people's obviously, yeah, definitely. So I mean, you go to some people's homes, you don't know what you're going to face, in their food wise.
Yeah, but looking back, it's I think I'm in the same boat. Kind of just chuckle at it.
Yeah, they took our food at Bragg heavy at the end, and it was the weirdest thing because they made us morsel all our food into like kit bags, and I don't even know if they sell them, but they used to have that meal kit bag, which is like the big bag, and there was like maybe 2 or 3 of those big bags filled with stuff, and they kept like threatening us, like, don't you dare eat the food out of that. If anyone dares go in that food, we're like, what the hell, like. At that point, we didn't even care about food, and it was like, no one touched that food. No one touched that food. So it was like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, those bags are huge too. And I remember, oh gosh, what event was it? It was probably a tough or something, but it was the same thing. I think there were 60 people there. All of our food went into bags. It's like, man, like I'm not even hungry, but I just want to eat some of this just so you don't have to carry it.
Yeah, it's different. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, look, I'm not one of these guys that says, "Oh, the events are so easy now, and it was way harder." I mean, listen, I did an event last year. It was a challenge right next to my house in Sleepy Hollow with Cadre Matt, and that was as hard as any event I've ever done. I mean, I tell everyone, I'm like, anyone who thinks some of these things have been watered down, I don't know what the hell they're talking about, because that was hard. That was pretty hard. So you never know what you're going to get. I mean, I'm sure there were easy events back in the day, and I'm sure there's way hard ones now. You just, you get what you get. It's a crapshoot.
I love to hear your thoughts on that too, because it's funny, right? I mean, I've been in since like 2011, and over the years, you've seen the same thing, and it kind of comes in cycles. Like, oh, the events are like every 2 or 3 years. Oh, the events are watered down. They're easy now. Like when Charming the Snake came, oh, so the events are going to be easy, and then. But I've noticed that they've never gotten easy, or at least I have found that they haven't. Same boat for you?
Yeah, I remember after I did my first 2 heavies, I signed up for one. It was in Coney Island, and we had BD, Jeff Reeves, and JJ. I'm sure you remember him, Jason J. And the funny thing was, I posted something on Facebook the day before. I was like, I'm kind of relaxed, and I think I'll be fine. No worries, I got this. It was just something innocuous right off there. So that was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done in my entire life, by far. I mean, it was unbelievably hard. And at one point we were doing reverse crab walks with the rucks on the chest up a hill. And Jeff Reeves looked at me with a smirk on his face, and he said, "You don't look too relaxed right now, man." He goes, What was all that on your Facebook page, man?" And I just looked at him. I was like, you know what? They haven't lost a step here. He checked my page the day before, and then he was like joking with me because I was not doing well going up that hill. But it was just, yeah, it's you never know what you're gonna get.
I mean, leave it to the cadre to be checking in on that stuff because
Yeah,
they're just looking for something. Like I'm gonna find something to screw these guys. Oh, here it is. Christopher
here it is.
posted on his Facebook page.
He thinks he's gonna have an easy time. Okay, here you go. We did, and I would definitely, if you want to talk about this, we did the 12 miler on the sand and on the boardwalk. So it was like for that particular heavy, it was a Coney Island one. I think it was 031. So about three-quarters of us they felt weren't going fast enough. They made us do it again. So we did the 12 miles, half on the beach, half on a boardwalk, and then we had to do it again. That was just the start. And then halfway through, it was raining, cold and wet. Jeff and JJ and Beatty seemed like they were bored. So that's when the hammer dropped on us, and it was, you got what you expected from all three of them, and
I think Dan mentioned it, but the 12 miler should be, a known, a constant. Like you should be able to knock that out because who's not to say that they're going to just make you turn around and walk the 12 back? And it sounds like in probably the worst conditions, sand and water and beach, you guys had to do that.
Right. Like my first heavy with Joel in DC, I'm from New York, right outside of Manhattan. And we went down to DC, and at that point in my life, I think I was only in Washington, DC once in my entire life. And we were along this miserable creek for what seemed to be about 12, 13 hours. Definitely the whole 12-mile part. It was wet and cold, and everyone's feet were messed up. It was all wet. It was along this uneven creek, and we lost people on the 12-miler. That was just the start. That was the DC one. Then at Bragg Heavy, we lost a few people during the 12-miler. We lost people during Coney Island 12-miler. The other heavy I did one in Boston or St. Patty's Day. That was 2014. I don't remember if we lost anyone during the 12-miler. We definitely lost people after the 12-miler at 2015 HCL. That 12-miler gets a lot of people. They're not prepared for it because, even during a light or a heavy, you never have that one unbroken, sustained movement. That's 3-4 hours.
It's just the same thing over and over and over again, just working the same muscle groups. I mean, one of the things about that made the Star Course hard was that it was just rucking. Like you don't have the breaks to do the push-ups and all the other PT and stuff. It's just the same muscle group over and over and over again.
Yeah, and you have a lot of people who's they've never been on long rucks, so they're not used to dealing with feet issues. So the blisters start kicking in, like you said, maybe the hip flexors start getting really tight or the knees really start going, and then by the time if they finish the 12-miler, they're already out of the event.
Yeah, and you just have all that time in your head to mentally quit, right? I mean, you start feeling a blister maybe 5 miles in, and then like 9 miles it feels worse because you didn't stop and spend 2 minutes to fix it, and then you hit 12 miles and you're like, you've had the past 7 miles to mentally check out. You check your feet after the 12 and you're like, yep, this is it.
That's it. And like when we had the first DC heavy with Joel, they play mind games. So Joel showed up after when the sunlight came up, and he showed up in a truck. I love Cadre Joel. He's one of my favorites of all time. So if he's listening to this, he's definitely one of my favorites. So he showed up in a pickup truck, and he had coffee in the back, if I remember correctly, and he put the gate down, and he said to, we were all, everyone was tired and everything. He said, look, we're only about halfway through this thing, and many of you are really not doing that well, and it's not your day, and I'll drive you wherever you want to go. He goes, sign up for another heavy. Today's not your day. It's okay. And we lost people right then and there. They hopped right in the back of his truck.
That is a trick right there.
Yeah.
Because some of those people that quit could have finished the event.
Yeah.
It's just that mental.
Yeah. And but that was one of the things, like, because we went down from New York City, and I think traveling for an event makes it harder to quit because you say, okay, if I quit an event, I still have to go home, and I still have, if I came down with anyone else, I still have to wait for them to be finished. So, what am I quitting for?
Yeah, right. And I don't know how it is for you and your family situation because you're you've got a child, but I've got two
Mm.
kids and, a wife. And when I go out and do an event, like it's not easy on the family. Neither of my kids sleep through the night. So I know that she's at home, like dealing with both of them. Probably at some point they're both in the bed because those kids are crazy and she's trying to get them back in their own beds. And so I know she's going through a lot at home. And so like what is my mental check is always what does it say about my appreciation of her work at home if I just quit the event?
Right. And the event that I went down for Bragg Heavy 2.0, one of the things that they told us many, many times, if you quit, and this was, listen, I had never been to North Carolina before, where Bragg usually is, it's not like a city or anything. It was in the middle of nowhere. So they were like, look, it's not like you're going right back to a warm hotel room. They were telling us, look, you're going to sit in the cold by yourself for a while until we get to you. So, you know, that was that factor. The second factor was, what if I quit, but my other buddies don't quit? What's going to happen then? So that was another thing always in the back of my head. Like, I can't quit. If they, what am I going to do? So if I quit, where am I going? How's that going to look? So then that went right out of my head. And I'm like, I'm staying in this. Yes, this stinks, but we all came down and we're all going back together.
Yeah. Burn the bridges, sink the ships.
Yep.
Just provide yourself no out because, like you said, I mean, what are you going to do? Just sit on the hood of the car? Or maybe if you're able to get the keys from the person who has them, sit inside the car for the next 10 hours? Like, that sucks. Why not suck at the event?
And we didn't even know who had the keys to the rental car because we all forgot about it. So even if they did bring us back to the rental car, we wouldn't have even known what to do because no one even know who had the key.
Oh man, yeah. So providing either no outs or like a worse out than what you're currently in, because at least you've got jokes at GORUCK events. There's gonna be no one telling jokes and you're just standing by yourself at a rental car for the next 8 hours or whatever.
And one of the cool things I always remember after that particular event was Steve-O, it was Chang and myself. We were driving home and we got a call on our phone and it said an Arizona number. So I didn't know who the heck this was. I was like, who? I don't know anyone in Arizona. And it was Cadre Aaron, and he was just calling to check up on us because he knew that we were driving home because one of the guys, Steve, had to go to a Boy Scouts thing for his kid that he had to make. So he just wanted to stay on the phone with us just to make sure we were safe. And we thought that was really a classy move.
It's pretty crazy to see the difference between Cadre at the events and then outside the events, right? I mean, just dropping the hammer left and right during the event, and then not a couple hours after they're calling to check in, make sure you guys are doing good.
Yeah, it was great. We had a nice conversation where we're on the road. We stopped at a Waffle House and one of those greasy spoon type of places. Just driving home, and he was just making sure we were safe, making sure we were alert and awake in the car, and it was like, wow, of all the things that they have going on here, they're taking time just to make sure we're safe. That made a good impression on us.
Oh, for sure. Have you ever gone to another non-GORUCK event where the person running it has given you a ring, make sure, even like just a message, make sure you're doing good?
You know what? Since I've done these events, I really haven't had much interest to do some of the other ones, like the Spartan race or the Tough Mudders and stuff. And the main reason being is I feel like the GORUCK events push me to my limit, but I never really feel like I'm in danger of getting physically injured, which I don't feel the same way about some of these other events. Where some of the apparatuses are not put together as well, or you're jumping high off a wall or something, or I don't want to twist an ankle or break, twist a knee and stuff like that. And that's training wise, like I'm really into training, and staying injury free is a very big priority. So, that's why I stick with the GORUCK events and not the other ones.
And I love hearing you say that you choose GORUCK because it helps you remain injury free. Because I'm sure a lot of people watch those videos and they say, yep, that's exactly how I'm going to get injured.
Well, you know what? Like, I've seen more people get injured at some of the other events from like slipping off of monkey bars, maybe falling off of a rope or something, or maybe coming down off or jumping off a wall improperly and then knee buckles or something. I've seen that a lot more frequently at some of the other things rather than the GORUCK events that I've done. And that's really something I'm not interested in. I don't need to tear a meniscus or something jumping off a wall. So
Yeah. And I mean, as you get older, like you said that you were nearly 40 for your first event.
yeah, for my first event, yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
mean, injury time just keeps extending. Like I turned 30 this year, and when I get injured, I notice that the recovery time is way longer than when I was, 20. Everything takes longer to heal, and so if you want to get the most time and the most events in, and the most out of your life, stay injury free.
right. Which is very humbling, and also it guides like my training. I mean, I'm up to tell my friends I'm into that whole Jocko way of Jocko Willink, way of training. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I get up and the cup of coffee, and I'm at the gym first thing in the AM. And I see these young guys, and they're going crazy with the deadlifts. They go crazy with the squats. They go crazy, and they're like, "Chris, how much could you do, Chris?" I'm like, "Hey, man, those days are over for me." I'm like, the ego has to get put in check as you get older, so you stay injury free. There's no benefit as you get older to really going crazy sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely see that. And man, Jocko posting those watch times, that guy's up early, and I wish I was up that early at the gym. I'm up that early with my kids. My son wakes up around 4:30 usually, and so I'm up
Oh
that time
boy.
every day, but I'm just like hanging out making breakfast, not getting after it.
Right. Well, what happened was I used to train at night, and then by the time after work, by the time I come home, it would create an issue at home because, obviously I want to spend time with my kid. And if I'm coming home at 8 o'clock at night, it's not conducive to that. So I had to switch my hours to early morning training versus at night. And there's a lot of benefits to it. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot of very good benefits to training in the morning versus in the evening if you have like a family and business like you do, that are issues to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know I've definitely changed up my workout schedule quite a bit since the first kid came, and definitely since the second kid came.
Second,
But
yeah.
um, but yeah, it's just important to find time still to get it in.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things too, I remember, before that first heavy we did, and I had never done anything like this before. I mean, you could grit out a light or even a challenge, but a heavy's a whole different animal, especially a 12 miler. And we reached out to, I'm sure you've heard the guy, Stu Smith's name before.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So he heard of that water bottle thing, and we reached out to him, and I was like, "Hey, Stu, we're doing this GORUCK heavy thing. We have no clue what the hell we're doing. How would you go about training for this thing?" And he was the nicest guy about it. He gave us this whole program, and he was like all into the GORUCK thing, and he was actually at Nasty as one of the cadre for the Nasty. A lot of people don't know that, and he set us up with this whole program, and he started getting me into that whole early AM thing, and he set me up right and set a few people up right with just training a little differently for these things versus the typical bodybuilding thing, or
yeah. Because I
which is
mean,
cool.
like you mentioned, bodybuilding. There's definitely programs you can follow. Running, train for a half marathon. Like there's a million different training plans out there for that, and they're all fairly similar. But like we talked about the GORUCK events, everyone's different, so training for them has to be different.
Yeah, and the funny thing, and one of the things I love about going to the events too, is everyone's different. You get running people and CrossFit people, triathlon people, bodybuilding people. You get jiu-jitsu people. You get people who've never done anything, and everyone seems to have like their own goals that they're pursuing, but not every one of those people needs to train the same way in order to be better at these events. So it's sort of an individualized thing too, as far as
Absolutely.
how I tell people go about training for these.
That's such a great way to look at it. And it's so true because the way a runner trains for a GORUCK event is going to be way different than, someone who's doing bodybuilding or weightlifting, or they're trying to get into the 1500 club or whatever. Like it's someone whose goal over a summer is to run, a marathon or a 50 miler. Like they cannot train the same way as if they're training for a GORUCK event that same summer as someone who's trying to get into the 1500 club. and is also training for that same GORUCK event.
Right. So, like that's one of the things that I like about at least having an event on my calendar is that it makes me train in a better way overall over a period of time. So I'm not focusing on any one particular thing. So I'm not just focused on strength. I'm not just focused on endurance. I'm not just focused on aesthetics, maybe. I have to focus on being overall conditioned for the event. So usually what I do is I put something on my calendar a few months out, and then I know I'm training for that particular event. So then I know, okay, I have this event coming up. I want to do well at it. So I better be in overall the best shape I can. So I won't focus in any one direction too much, which has served me pretty well so far, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it sure seems like it. You've done a number of events. You've done a number of really hard events. So it seems like it's serving you pretty well.
Yeah, a lot of the thing too is I try to focus on mobility and keeping just the basics. Just being able to do pull-ups, being able to do push-ups, being able to do basic movements, being able to run a mile, being able to bench press your body weight at least, those kind of things. Being overall just well-balanced, which at first wasn't fun. I mean, when you're young, you want to bench press as much as you can. You want to squat as much as you can. Some of the other guys, they just want to abs, for the beach or something. With this, it's a little more challenging, which is good, because it's not fun focusing on your weaknesses.
No, not at all. I mean, leaving the gym and having, like maxed your bench or something or PR'd it makes you feel really good. But if you go there and work on something that you're terrible at and you see everyone around you doing way better, you're like, man, this was a sucky day. But it's a bunch of those days and working on those weaknesses that build a overall great athlete that can do GORUCK events.
Yeah, so a bunch of us, like one of the good things I think GORUCK has done recently was with these ruck clubs. So we have a local one, which is called, I think, Big Apple Rucking Club or something. And it's gotten a lot of people into the community, which is great. And we just did West Point. They have a half marathon every year, and they have a ruck division there. So a bunch of us just did that this past weekend. And I did it, and I did a pretty decent time for myself, but I noticed a lot of my weaknesses of what I need to focus on. So, I'm like, all right, this is why you test yourself. Go push yourself on your weaknesses. And, it's just a matter of like not being vain about it, not having an ego about it, but just trying to be better at overall of everything. It's like if you're not pursuing a world record in one particular lift, there's no need to just vanity lift in that particular thing. That's my just viewpoint on it.
Makes total sense to me. Absolutely. So you mentioned that you like having events on the calendar because then you've got something, to train for and to keep going after. How far in advance do you usually flush out your events calendar?
Well, it usually depends on when the sale happens.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes, they have a sale where it's so, it's just inexplicably cheap to me. I mean, some of the times the price points at some of the events when they announce them way in advance, how could you not jump on it? I mean, some of them are just a steal. So usually I sign up for them, but I usually try to have things at least 2 to 3 months ahead. That's usually what I try to do, because I usually try to have the training at least 8 weeks. 8-week cycles of training, knowing of when I'm going to up it, then I'm going to have a little bit, tailor off a little bit, and then have the event, and then I'll ramp it up, and then I'll tailor it back a little bit. That's usually how I gauge in my head.
That's perfect. And I'm in the same boat with the sales.
Brian, I've been at this since I'm 13. So, after you have to be training for a while, you get to know your body. So, you sort of know what works, what doesn't, when you can push it, when you can't, so at this point in my life, I think I pretty well honed in on what's going to work for me or not. So that seems to work. I mean,
Yeah. And I want to talk about something about that real quick, but going back to the sales for 1 second, I'm in the same boat. I buy pretty much all my events on sale, and I've been so bad. I have actually signed up for the same event multiple times just because I was so excited about the sale.
I've done that.
But GORUCK's been awesome because they always convert one of them to an event credit, so I can just apply it somewhere else. But I don't know any other event company that will take pity on idiots like myself who sign up for the same thing twice.
Yeah, I have no complaints with it. Sometimes you see like some comments here or there, and I'm like, I don't know what company these people have been dealing with, but anytime I've had any issue whatsoever, they've gone over and above to the point where I almost feel awkward or uncomfortable accepting what they're giving me, because I feel like, hey, I don't want anything for free here. I don't want, you guys are doing enough, like, to where it's like a little uneasy for me. But it's usually I try to get the 9/11 events. I always, that's every year, no doubt. Anything that's really close to home, I usually sign up for that. Like I signed up for the Star Course, the 50 miler in September, because that's the next challenge for me. So
it's gonna be a good set of events coming up.
Yeah. I have Red Wings coming up. And hopefully if I could fit in other ones, I'd love to fit in. I mean, my only problem is, listen, it's not even a problem. It's a great thing. We have a busy family life. We have a busy my work is very demanding. So, I would love to do more events. It's just sometimes life gets in the way,
Yep. And I mean, same boat over here with the kids and everything, but it's just trading some sort of good for another sort of good, right? I love going to GORUCK events, but I love spending time with my family. So at the very least, it's both good things.
Yeah, my wife is very supportive. I mean, she's met she's not a, GRT kind of thing, but she's met almost all my friends who I've met. And almost to a person, she likes every single one of them. I mean, the people I've met over the last 6 years or so, just such a wide-ranging group of people I never in a million years would probably ever interact with. Almost everyone's nice, cut from, similar cloth, just people, doing the best they can, trying to improve themselves, whether it's through these events or other things. And, it's just been nothing but a great experience so far.
Yeah. So talking for a second about the people in the community, it's interesting, right? Because maybe about 20 minutes ago, we were talking about how the types of people show up to events. You've got runners, you've got weightlifters, you have bodybuilders, you've got, people who don't consider themselves athletes at all. You have all these different types of people, but like the one thing that they have in common is just that general mindset. And it's so, at least personally, I find it really interesting talking to everyone at these events, because if you go to, I'm sure it was when you went to bodybuilding competitions, everyone there's a bodybuilder you're talking to. If you go to races, like a marathon, everyone there is a marathoner. But when you go to GORUCK events, you just get all these different types of people coming together, and you just get so many different stories and personalities and people to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just get people who do yoga, and listen, yoga's a great thing. I should probably do way more of it, and I probably would benefit a million times from doing it. But I never associated like GORUCK and yoga and stuff. But you meet a lot of people who just do yoga, and they love doing an event, and they do just great. And it's just, you're talking like, wow, and they're doing something hard. They're getting out there. They're pushing themselves. And you know what? You get there, it's 2, 3 in the morning, and everyone is, embracing the suck like that. And you're like, you know what? Everyone is going through the same thing here. And it's a good feeling, because it's like, wow, like I know how I'm feeling, and they know how they're feeling, and we sort of feel the same way, despite the fact that we come from such different backgrounds and just lifestyles and everything, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. And personally, I love yoga in moderation. I can't do any of the 60-minute ones because I start to lose my mind. But like nice 20-minute, like that's my jam. Is like nice 16 to 22-minute sessions are awesome for me. But like you said, I've done a GORUCK Tough event where someone showed up and the only training they had done for it was just a bunch of hot yoga, and they got through the event.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Like, I've seen people who've never done anything, and they show up with a smile on their face, and they don't even know what they're there for. Really quick, because this just brought up a crazy memory. I did an event in New York City. It was a challenge years ago, and it was only like 8 of us, and we had Cadre Aaron, and a guy showed up. The guy didn't even speak English. His boss brought him there. His boss didn't even tell him what he was signed up for. He was one of his helpers. The guy was like a carpenter or something. And the guy showed up with a GoPro chest, like one of those chest rigs with the camera on the front. And he didn't speak a word of English. And Cadre Aaron asked him, he goes, "Do you even know what you're here for?" The guy goes, "No, my boss told me to be here. So I'm just working. And the guy got through the event, and Kadri Aaron made him the team leader right off the bat. Yeah. And the guy made it through. The guy never did. Guy didn't speak English. He didn't even know what he was there for. His boss just brought him there just for whatever reason. He had no idea what GORUCK was, had no idea about nothing. He just showed up, put the backpack on, had this chest GoPro thing on, and just, got through it.
That's phenomenal. What a sight to see.
Yeah, it was great. It was one of those things we always laughed about it, but the guy was a great guy, sucked it up, and he managed his way to being the team leader. And, you're like, wow, like, where the heck else would I, encounter something like this,
Right? At the last Constellation event I did, which was, I guess, at the beginning of this month, or last month, depending on when this airs, there was a couple that showed up, and it was the guy's birthday present to himself was that he was going to do this, and his wife's birthday present to him was that she was going to do it with him, but she had no idea what she was getting herself into.
Oh God!
And at the beginning, the cadre is like, "So you're good with getting pepper sprayed, right? Like right in the face?" And they thought he was joking. I think at first he's like, "No, I'm being mad serious here. Like you're going to get pepper sprayed tonight in the face. Are you good with that?" And it was fun.
We had a light back in, I think it was 2014, and 65 people were signed up, and it was supposed to be, Big Mike, Hot Mike, whatever, So because there were 65 people signed up, they called in Brian Squared he was at home in Georgia, and he came, and they flew him up that morning, and there was only 30 people at the start point. So I don't know if you've ever done an event with him. He's no joke. So he showed up. He's like, they kept me from watching college football for this. And he was angry. He was really upset. He brought it. So there was a couple there who was about to be engaged, or they were engaged or something, guy Bernie. So Brian Squared made us go up these huge stairs and right along the Hudson River. Backward bear crawls up the stairs. And the girl couldn't do it. She just couldn't do it. And Brian Square's like, I don't care. He's like, we'll stay here all day till she does it. And she was screaming at him. She was like, you told me this was going to be like a Spartan race, and you told me this was going to be easy. And Brian didn't care. He just sat there. He's like, we're going to stay here all day till she does this. They wound up breaking up after that event because of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a story.
They wound up breaking up. Yeah.
Maybe I should get them on the podcast.
Yeah. She broke up with him after that.
That is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we were laughing at the time, but I mean, he was like, hey, I guess I learned a good lesson. She wasn't one for me, but to sit there and watch it, we're like, oh man,
Just to watch that whole thing unfold, because you guys are probably at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, he didn't care.
Yeah.
He was angry because he was missing football,
Yeah. And what a great example of, how different GORUCK events are. If if there's a race director, you're doing a 5K or a 10K or whatever, and they have to wake up early, or they have to miss, something, and they were called that morning because there's supposed to be 60 people, and only 30 showed up. Like, wait, that's going to piss off a cadre right there. 50% show up, and they had to call someone else in. He's like, I didn't have to be here for this. But a race director for like a 10K can't magically create new hills. It like make your 10K on a mountain. Right. There's nothing that they can do, but so much of what happens at events is dictated by the cadre. So
yeah, and these guys are just so they can make they can just make things up on the fly and make some things that seem so simple make it the most miserable 5 minutes of your life. They just, I guess because they've been through it, and they're just so used to it. But little things like just railroad ties, they find telephone poles, or whatever it may be, just laying on the side of the road, all of a sudden becomes horrible.
Yeah, like you said, simple things. Like, what's that? I can't even remember the name of the exercise for it, but that overhead clap one, where you right you do 75 100 of those with a ruck on, and it's just like a ton of mini shrugs. Like you burn out your shoulders and your arms quick. And what are you doing? You're just clapping your hands above your head.
We had one in Sleepy Hollow, and I remember it was Mike and Cleve. And I don't know if you ever did an event with Cleve. He's awesome too. And Mike I guess they play good cop, bad cop sometimes. I don't know. I mean, maybe they set that out in the beginning. I have no idea. We must have done 250 just like ruck overhead thrusters. Like just a simple thing like that, like just cause people just to bow out. Just they were like, I'm done right at the beginning. Simple thing.
Yeah. Anything in excess, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things too, it's like I was thinking about this because I try all the time to get my friends into this, and they look at pictures on Facebook. Like you post things, I post things, other people post things, and they're like, "Hey, what's all this thing about?" And the number one thing they always is, "I don't want to get cold, I don't want to get wet, and I don't want to get yelled at." I'm like, I try to explain to them like, you're not going to get yelled at probably, but I'm like, a lot of times when you're getting cold, you're thankful for getting cold because you're so hot and like, happy to do other stuff than what you were doing prior. But I don't want to tell them that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, do you know what's way easier than a burpee on land? A burpee in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got all that water like pushing you up, giving you that extra boost. I mean, it is way less difficult.
But the crazy thing is, like a lot of my friends, they hear burpee, and whether it's on land, whether it's on air, whether it's in the water, they don't want to know anything. And that's one of the things I love about all this is like the people that you meet. We deal with it. We like this stuff. We enjoy it. It's fun. It's just such a break from the usual complaining you get, from a lot of people in your regular life who don't want to do anything. So it's like, all right, I know I'm not going to get this from these people, which is who I'm associating with, which is cool.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone, well, maybe not everyone, because look at GoPro guy, but most people went to the GORUCK website, looked at the pictures, and said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea."
Yeah, one of the first things, like when I first got into this, it wasn't even an official video. There were just like a few like not homemade videos, but they were like kind of like homemade sort of making a video for the event kind of thing. And there was like only a few like New York City 9/11 event videos that used to be out there. And I remember seeing those and being like, you know what? I want to be part of that. Like I want to do that.
Did you ever watch that GoPro video where the guy had the GoPro and they start out by like doing the Indian runs up the steps?
No.
Oh, I watched that video like 100 times. At least 100 of those views on that video are from me before my first event. So I was trying to figure out, I was like, man, I can't wait to do my first event. And yeah, just like the thought you had, I want to do that.
Yeah. And I remember seeing one video. There was this guy in Detroit and he looked like a big guy. And I guess he did an event with Cadre Joel around like a football stadium or something. And this guy looked traumatized, basically. Like, he was just like looking like, oh my God, I can't believe what the hell I just went through. And oh my God. But I was like, you know what? I want to try that. I was like, this guy looks like a pretty big dude. And like, he's saying it's hard. I'm like, I want to try it out. And, this was before all the like professional videos and stuff like that, where all the friendly stuff.
Yeah, this was back when it was, Shadows showing up, shooting some video, or people bringing a GoPro, and back before they actually had a marketing team.
Right, which to me doesn't make it that those events were any harder or easier. I just think now people have a lot more knowledge and understanding of what's to be expected, and there's ways to train and prepare for it that takes that whole element of uncertainty out of it.
Yes, I think that's hit the nail on the head with that one. There's because you had no idea what to train for before. You had no idea what gear to bring. Like, I need a backpack and bricks. All right, and the bricks take up so much space in the freaking backpack as it is. So you're trying to get your bladder in there, which I don't know about your bladder, but my first event, my bladder popped thanks to my bricks. And there was it wasn't harder. It was just different due to the lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I think my first few events, what got me was I had no idea what to do with my feet. And I had horrible blisters through a lot of my first bunch of events. And when you have blisters on the bottom of your feet, it makes a massive difference of how you consider going through the rest, through the event itself. And thankfully, I've learned over the time what to do. But those first, suffering through blisters on your feet, not fun.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, you spend a fair amount of time at your feet on these events.
Yeah, I mean, when I did the HTL, I calculated it. I was up early Thursday morning because just naturally get up, and I hadn't gone to bed. I didn't rest in between the events. I stayed up, and I didn't go to sleep until about Sunday 1 a.m. by the time it was over. So I was on my feet more or less for 3 days. You're right. Same with a heavy. A lot of times if a heavy starts, say at 6 or 9 or whatever it is, you're still getting up early in the morning usually, or that morning, the regular day. Then you got to show up to the event, do the 24-hour event. Then it's over. If you go to the bar, you go somewhere else afterwards, or if you're preparing for the challenge afterwards, you're still on your feet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's slow burn on that one. And I know,
Yeah.
and that's the thing with events, right? Some of the best events I've had were ones where I took the day off before the event or the day of the event so I could get some rest. But I'd say that is not the norm. In most events, I've worked a full day and then, show up 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever to start off, and you're already just a little beat, been on your feet.
And now you have to do the event.
Yeah.
You know, and now you got to do the event, and now you got to be told why you're going so slow and why you stink and, why you're not strong enough and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit of insult to injury on that one.
But again, that's one of the things why I love how the whole thing is set up, because it's testing you mentally just as much as physically, if not more. Because it's the whole thing of getting to the event, preparing for it, showing up prepared, getting through. There's a lot more to it just than like, oh, okay, 12 hours. It's a lot more involved than just showing up and exercising for a few hours.
Yep. You have to commit a lot more than what you have to do for typical workouts and typical events. And then because you have to do that and because you've gone through those events, when you're looking at things in your, like you said, in your life or your job, like, oh, I have to work late tonight. It's like, well, I'm not doing 13 hours under a log. So that's something.
Right. And you know what? Like I try to explain to some of my friends. I'm like, they're like, why do you keep doing these things? And what the hell? Like you got nothing to prove. I'm like, it's not about proving anything. I'm like, I just enjoy being in such a different environment, such a completely different whole just mental state of mind in the middle of the night with these people who show up who I might never see again just for that little brief period of time. And then when it's over, the sense of satisfaction, I'm like, that's why I always come back.
The best sunrises I've ever watched have been at GORUCK events.
Yeah, because you never thought they would come.
Yeah. Yep. And it's, just taking, every now and then I'll have a cadre who will stop us for a sunrise and just let us enjoy it, which is like a double-edged sword, right? Because they're just hoping that you're going to lock up. And when you get going again after spending 15 minutes standing there watching it, that it's going to be tough. And usually it is, but just taking a break from everything you're doing and really enjoying it, it's something special.
Yeah, the funny thing is almost every single overnight event I've done, almost the same conversation happens around like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. It's like, it's got to be 5 o'clock. It's got to be 6 o'clock. No, it's got to be 7 o'clock. And then somehow, some way, someone passes a clock or something on a wall, and then you realize it's only like maybe 3:30 or something, and everyone's like, it's such a downer. Everyone's like, oh my God, and then they're like, I can't believe it's only 3:30.
Yeah, it's such a mystery. When you're in downtown Seattle, bars let out at, well, they usually do last call around 1:30 or so, but they're like 100% closed by 2, and so you're like, all right, it's got to be after 2 because no one's around. But it's just all a bunch of question marks on what the actual time is, and most likely, than not, it's like 2:45, and you think it's 4:30.
Then but eventually the sun comes up, it does rise, and then I've just track it back to one thing, like of all the heavies of everything I've ever done, other than that brag heavy thing, which was an anomaly with that ending, I've never seen anyone really quit once the sun came up. Even in a heavy challenge, same thing. Once the sun comes up, I think people get like a second wind, and then they're pretty good to go.
Yeah. Thinking back, the only thing I've really seen since the sun's come up has been, med calls.
Right.
So you've done so many events over the years, and I just want to track back as well. You mentioned that you've been, an athlete since a young age. I think you said 13. Do you have tips for people who are listening on staying injury free, staying in the game?
Yeah. So I'm going to be 44 next month, and knock on wood, I've never injured anything. I've never been to a hospital. I've never ruptured anything. I've never torn a knee. I've never had any kind of injury so far. And despite that, and one of the things I always attribute that to is just keeping my ego in check and being safe as far as the weight, the amount lifted. So if I'm doing a new movement, I'm not pushing the envelope weight wise. If I'm doing even like if I'm good in a particular movement, say bench press at this point, I'm not even pushing it anymore because I say, what am I going to, I always go in my head an analysis. What is the benefit? What is the potential cost of really pushing myself in a particular movement? And is the risk of injury worth it? And usually when I do that calculus in my head, I usually come up with a certain amount of weight or a certain amount of rep ranges or something, which keeps me in the safe zone. So that's usually what's kept me injury free. But if I could attribute it to any one particular thing.
And I'm just thinking in my head right now, to any of the other times that I've never torn anything. I've never had any serious injuries, but I have, I've ended up with back pain and shoulder pain and that stuff. And
Right.
Usually, every case I can think of right now in my head, they were all caused from either new movements with the same amount of weight that I've been using for movements that I, know like the back of my hand, or just going way too heavy for way too long.
Right. Because a lot of times what happens is when you go in too heavy and you're not doing it in a safe fashion, your body's moving in a much different way just to kind of deal with that new added weight. And then you're pushing, you're doing movements that are going to make you more susceptible to injuring yourself. I like sometimes I joke around with I love CrossFit. I don't do it, but I like the way that so many people have used it as a way to, really, like you say, get after it and get in shape. But some of the things I see with the kipping pull-ups and sometimes the people doing the Olympic lifts with horrible form, you're just asking for an injury there. It's not that I'm insulting it. It's not that I'm criticizing it. It's just sometimes people are getting a little ahead of themselves, wanting to do a movement, but just going too heavy, too fast.
Yeah.
And
it's a tough environment, right? Because if you're new to CrossFit and you show up, you might not, know the lifts perfectly. And I mean, there's no shame in practicing them with low weight to get the form down and then going heavier. But you're looking around and you're seeing people who are just killing it. And you're like, I want to kill it too. That's what I want to do. And I want to look like them. And so you try your best and then you just end up injuring yourself.
Yeah, well, a lot of it too as you get older. I hate to be cliche about it, but with age comes wisdom. And as you get older, you realize, okay, you know what? Is it going to really make a difference if I cut it down a few pounds versus and be safe? Am I going to really gain that much more if I go a little heavier? Does anyone even care? No one cares. So my advice to all my friends is be safe, stay in the game, enjoy it, have fun, show up on a consistent basis, and over time you get really good results. The consistency of effort in general matters a heck of a lot more than just a PR on one day or, just really lifting a lot of weight in a particular thing another day. It's really just a routine over time that yields the best results. That's the best advice I could give to anybody.
And that's great advice. I'm as I, keep training for events, I'm definitely going to take it to heart. And I, try to learn from every mistake I've made in the past. And that's awesome advice.
Yeah, like you see some of these guys, like one of the things that Stu Smith always talks about is like with people in buds. Like I don't know if you ever saw that what was it, Buds 234 documentary on Discovery Channel. They showed the whole thing where they went through, and Stu always talks about it. People, they have a lot of running there, and you have a lot of people who they're not accustomed to the volume of running required, and they get shin splints and they get injured, and they didn't train properly, and they wind up having to drop out because they didn't train properly. Then you see, why didn't they train properly? Oh, because they wanted to do a different type of program than is required for that particular thing. So same like we're mentioning for GORUCK. Like if you're doing bodybuilding stuff, probably not going to have as good a time at an event as if you train maybe a little more well-rounded overall stuff.
Yeah. And Stu Smith is such a excellent resource. It's really cool that you're able to reach out to him and get some info for your events.
Oh, yeah. Listen, so one year my wife reached out to him, was like, hey, it's my husband's birthday and I'd love to surprise him. So we went down and she was talking with him, and I went down to train with him for a week a few years ago. And he was like, yeah, just come down, whatever. And I went to go train with him for a week down in Maryland. He's got a whole thing down there, and it was fun. Like, he's a great dude. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, he writes just tons of different articles, and they all get, published in great spots. He's got books out. He's got stuff specifically on wrecking. He just seems super humble in all of his writing. I'll read an article, and I'll get to the end. I'm like, man, that was a good article. I'll see, oh, that was by Stu Smith. Like, of course it was a great article, but you don't see him, throwing ads in like the first line, oh, or buy my books, or I've, got these credentials. It's like just tons of great information, and it's like written by Stu Smith. Like, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, when I talked to him, I asked him, I was like, hey, everyone thinks like, oh, he's probably like, one of these yellers and screamers, drill instructor types, and he's always more like, hey, I'm a coach. I'm not a screamer. And I think that's how it comes across, which is why he gives good advice. It's not just like he's screaming advice at people. It's just like, hey, just take a look at this way to do things differently.
Yeah. And you've been doing sports since, like you said, a young age. And so you've probably worked with a lot of coaches.
That's a great point, because you know what? One of the other piece of advice I would give people, if you're looking to do a certain type of activity, seek out the people who've done it before you, and they're probably going to give you good advice.
Absolutely.
So that's who we went to for advice on how to do our first heavy, and it worked out pretty well.
Sure sounds like it.
Yeah, and one of the main things that he made us do differently was we worked more, obviously more time on our feet. We did a lot of plank holds. We did a lot of stuff like that. Getting the shoulders stronger, getting the joints a little stronger. And the time on your feet really does matter. Getting those lower extremity joints just used to some of the miles, in a heavy situation is really important, especially if it's someone who's listening to this, their first heavy. It's hard to explain just the amount of just stress on your lower legs if you're not used to it that an event like that will bring, especially after the 12-miler.
Yeah. I remember laying down after my heavy and thinking, oh my gosh, this feels like just getting all the weight off of these joints just feels so good.
Yeah, I think I waddled around for a week after my first one. I had the blisters on the feet and the whole thing, and it was like, oh my God, like what the heck? And then, of course, you have to hear it from your family and your significant others, like, what the heck are you signing up for? What are you doing? And you don't want to tell them inside your head, like, yeah, I want to do another one.
Right. Yeah, and then you hear something like, well, I'm glad he got that out of his system. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, I always get, you told me this was going to be your last one. I don't understand. And I'm like, yeah, that was like 10 events ago.
Yeah, yep. My wife knows the routine now. It's just a bunch of, you did this to you. You still have to be present.
Yeah, but I always tell my friends and family, this is my hobby. This is what I enjoy doing. It's a much better alternative than a lot of the other vices that are out there, or other things that people, sometimes unfortunately, go down the rabbit hole on. So, if this is the worst thing you could say that I engage in, so be it,
Absolutely. There's way worse hobbies to have than GORUCK.
Listen, Brian, I want to thank you for keep having me on the show.
For sure. Chris, man, thank you so much again for taking all this time out of your Friday to chat with me. I really appreciate it. I had a ton of fun. Thank you so much for listening to the All Day Ruckoff podcast. I really hope you enjoyed this episode with Christopher. I had a ton of fun talking with him about everything GORUCK related. Again, if you have not seen that video of him trying to open the water bottle, hit up the show notes, alldayruckoff.com/podcast/episode-098, or just hit the show notes button in your podcast app. If you're headed off to GRT Reunion, I hope you have a great time. It should be a ton of fun. Unfortunately, I won't be there. I'm back at home hanging out with my son, who's still recovering from his open heart surgery, and staying busy with that. I want to thank you all so much for just all of the incredible support. It's truly, truly appreciated. And as always, don't forget, attitude is everything. Keep yours positive, and drink hard, ruck harder. Fun. Unfortunately, I won't be there. I'm back at home hanging out with my son, who's still recovering from his open heart surgery, and staying busy with that. I want to thank you all so much for just all of the incredible support. It's truly, truly appreciated. And as always, don't forget, attitude is everything. Keep yours positive and drink hard, rock harder.